Hi everybody, it's Az here from HeelvsBabyface on the alpha for World of Warcraft's next expansion, Legion, and today cracked open the Shamlock because I want to have a look at the new Warlock spec which has become available. It's the final spec for people to have a crack at, which is the Destruction spec. So before I go into kind of how I've constructed my own build, you of course are free to construct your own builds as well, and also have a little bit of gameplay footage. Just going to go through the talents so we can see exactly what's been changed, what's been tweaked, and if anything kind of jumps up at us. And then at the end of the video, I kind of give you my opinion or how I think it all works together. So, up on the screen right now are the new Destruction talents. Some of them have some very familiar names indeed, because they are current passives, which are now going to be choices. So if you don't choose them, you ain't getting them. So first up, level 15, these choices, we have Backdraft, which is one of these things I've just been talking about. Casting Conflagrate reduces the cast time of Incinerate and Chaos Bolt by 30%. For 5 seconds. So this has already had a bit of a tweak. Currently, it's when you hit Conflagrate, your next 3 Incinerates or your next 1 Chaos Bolt has the reduced cast times. This is actually putting it within a very succinct period of time. Bear in mind, when you use Conflagrate, your spells go on GCD, global cooldown, and this will get eaten straight away out of the 5 seconds, so yay. So really, it's like 4.5 seconds to get those spells out. Incinerate is casting at roughly 1.75 seconds, so you've really, if you want all 3 Incinerates, you've really got to go bang, bang, bang. And if you want to get that Chaos Bolt, it has to go immediately. So if there's any sort of movement involved, and you've used your Conflagrate to proc, chances are you may only get 2 Incinerates out the deal. You should be able to get the full Chaos Bolt, but yeah, that's become a bit of a dodgy one. To me, that is certainly a nerf that Backdraft has received right there. Next across, we have Roaring Blaze. Passive ability again. Conflagrate increases your remaining Immolate damage on the target by 50% until Immolate expires or is refreshed. Now, we do have 2 charges of Conflagrate. That's still happening in Legion as well. So if you blow your 2 charges, because you're so used to blowing the 2 charges to stack the Backdraft to hit the 6 Incinerates or the 2 Chaos Bolts, you're actually doing yourself a real disservice now. So it's a matter of blasting off 1 charge, letting the tick go on. If you refresh it, hit the 2nd charge. It kind of causes some very clunky gameplay, shall we say. And then thirdly, and to me the choice all day long, is Shadow Burn, 1 Soul Shard to fire it off, because remember, no more Burning Embers, no more Demonic Fury. Every spec of a Warlock is returned back to Soul Shards. Amen, fingers up. Fingers up? Maybe bums. Thumbs up for that, because, you know, that definitely makes it feel more Warlocky. Costs a Soul Shard to cast. It's an instant cast, 40-yard range, blasts the target for about 76,500 shadow damage. All this, of course, depends on your gear and your item level and such. It will generate 2 Soul Shards if the target dies within 5 seconds of it being cast. So it still has some sort of effect that it does now, but it doesn't have to come into play at below 20%. This can be fired off at any opportunity. Full health, 100%. Start blasting people with Shadow Burn. No, seriously, do. We'll find that out shortly. The level 30 talents, we have Reverse Entropy. Passive ability, once more, reduces the cast time of Chaos Bolt and Rain of Fire by ½ a second, and they restore 35% of your maximum mana. I thought this was going to be quite a good talent to choose initially. After some testing, I think it's a little bit of a waste. Rain of Fire really doesn't figure into much play here, but that said, haven't come across too many mass packs where you really need to get Rain of Fire out. But again, even if you do, it's coming at such a sort of rare rate of knots. Yeah, it's not kind of really ticking any boxes for me. Fire and Brimstone. Passive ability. Incinerate now hits all enemies near your target. So Fire and Brimstone is a current ability that we have on live servers where you click it and you depress it, and that changes your incinerates and your chaos bolts and stuff depending on how you've talented stuff to hit multiple targets. It's now a passive. So simply by having this talent, your incinerates will hit all nearby targets for no reduction of damage either. So it's going to be hitting them all for full-on damage. I quite like this Fire and Brimstone. And then finally, this is where decisions come into play. We have Mana Tap. Instant cast consumes 40% of your current mana to grant 10% increased damage for 20 seconds. So if you can figure Mana Tap into the rotation, it could be a pretty good thing to bring in. However, it is figuring it in to the rotation, and we'll get onto that a little bit later on. So we're going to now to the level 45 talents. We got Demon Skin, passive ability. This has just received a bit of a boost because Warlocks have been insanely squishy in Legion so far, and this is here to try and give them a bit of robustness. Passive, your Soul Leech now absorbs, your Soul Leech absorption now passively recharges at a rate of 1% of maximum health every 1 second, and may now absorb up to 20% of maximum health. Now, this really is a beauty. It puts a lovely fat shield on you, which absorbs a lot of your damage. So there can be instances where you're just not losing any health at all because the demon skin is just soaking and soaking and recharging and soaking. So out in the world, it's an absolute diamond, I've got to say. Mortal Coil, 66,000 mana cost, 20-yard range, instant cast and a 45-second cooldown. Horrifies an enemy target into fleeing, incapacitating them for 3 seconds and healing you for 11% of maximum health, pretty much as is right now. Shadow Fury, slightly different. 30-yard range, 30-second cooldown, 1.32 second cast. Yeah, there's a cast time attached. Stuns all enemies within 8 yards for 3 seconds. I'm going Demon Skin all day long, I'll tell you right that for now. Level 60 talents, we've got Eradication, passive ability. Chaos Bolt increases the damage you deal to the target by 12% for 6 seconds. Now, this can be very useful depending on which spec you go down, but there is a spec, which we'll get to shortly, which just screams to be picked here. And it didn't really take too long to jump into, I think, everybody's mind. In actual fact, when Destruction came out to be tested, I did a series of tweets where I was just like, oh, this is a bit clunky, this is a bit clunky, and then suddenly I was just like, wait a minute, I think I've found a spec, because it suddenly started to organically come together. But we'll see that shortly. Next up, we've got Clericalism! 40-yard range, 2.65 second cast time, depending on haste, of course. 1 minute cooldown. Conjures a Cataclysm at the target's location, dealing 157,000 Shadow Flame damage to all enemies within 8 yards, and afflicting them with Immolate. So pretty much as is now. Then we've got Soul Harvest. At first glance, maybe not so good. At second glance, when you understand where things are going to start fitting together, very good. Soul Harvest, 1.76 second cast, 2 minute cooldown, immediately generates 5 soul shards. Some people might be putting pieces together on a spec here. Next up, level 75 talent tree, we have Demonic Circle. Pretty much as is now. 55,000 mana cost, around about half a second cast, summons a demonic circle for 6 minutes, allowing you to cast it again to teleport to its location. Also removes movement slowing effects. It's got a limit of 1. You can only have 1 demonic circle up at any one time. Burning Rush, we're all aware of this little beauty, increases your movement speed by 50%, but also damages you for 5% of your maximum health every 1 second. Movement impairing effects may not reduce you below 100% of normal movement speed, and it lasts until cancelled, so pretty much as is again. And then Dark Pact, instant cast, a minute cooldown, sacrifices 20% of your demon's current health to shield you for 400% of the sacrificed health for 20 seconds. If you have Nah Demon, your health is sacrificed instead, usable while suffering from control impairing effects. So it's all good. It's all kind of good, that tree. You know, Burning Rush for mobility, Demonic Circle again for mobility, Dark Pact for survivability. So the level 90 ones, we have Grimoire of Supremacy. This is the revamped Grimoire of Supremacy, which is essentially what we have at the moment with, you know, demonic, whatever it is. You are able to maintain control over even greater demons indefinitely, allowing you to summon a Doomguard or Infernal as a permanent pet. We've then got Grimoire of Service, pretty much as it works now. Summons a second demon which fights for you for 25 seconds and deals 100% increased damage. The demon will immediately use one of its special abilities when summoned. Imp cleanses you of magic effect, Voidwalker will taunt, Succubus will seduce, and the Fell Puppy will interrupt us. So again, pretty much as is. And then finally, Grimoire of Sacrifice has received quite a substantial revamp. Instant cast, 30-second cooldown. Sacrifice your demon to gain demonic power, causing your spells to sometimes also deal X amount of damage, depending on score, of course, item level, shadow damage to the target and other enemies within 8 yards. Lasts an hour or until you summon a demon. I mean, the biggest attraction to me about the current Grimoire of Sacrifice was the single target boost that it gave. And also, if you use it with Havoc, the dual target boost that it gave. But this now is kind of like, it really would only be effective in sort of AoE circumstances. I'm not convinced of that one. And then finally, the level 100 row, we have Wreak Havoc, passive ability. Havoc now lasts for 20 seconds and has no cooldown. Now this is quite a biggie because what it means is you can always have a target havocked, essentially. So that's pretty darn funky. So you can literally just jump havoc to target. So you're doing double damage. So as long as there's 2 targets up, Wreak Havoc can really be an effective spell. However, we'll carry on to something else. Channel Demonfire, 53,000 mana cost, 40-yard range, channeled, 13 odd second cooldown, launches 15 bolts of Fellfire over 2.5 seconds-ish, random targets afflicted by your Immolate within 40 yards. Each bolt deals around about 11,000 fire damage. Okay, so again, it's something that's got to be inflicted with Immolate. So, Channel Demonfire, Cataclysm, they're kind of looking like AoE synergistic spells there. Finally, Soul Conduit. First glance, you may think, eh. But if you've been working a spec together, you might think, ooh. Soul Conduit, passive ability. Every soul shard you spend has a 30% chance to be refunded. So what kind of spec did I decide to go with myself? Well, we'll have a look in a moment. I'm not saying it's the best spec. I'm not saying it's the most damaging of specs, but it felt the most organic. Everything else felt really, really clunky and really, really awkward. So let's go have a look. So this is what I have come up with. I'm going to go through my talents. I'm going to tell you why I've selected them, and then we'll get to some gameplay and then some sort of overview conclusions about this spec. So first row, level 15, gone with Shadowburn. Reason why? I'm building my whole spec around this spell. It became very obvious very early on when you decided to play with different specs that Shadowburn was really the one that was going to allow you a little bit more organic play, and you could centre so many of the other talents around it. Second row, I decided to go with Mana Tap, get the extra 10% damage for 12 seconds. Fire and Brimstone wasn't going to be too much of usage because not too many Incinerates are going to be fired off, and also not too many Chaos Bolts or Rain of Fires are going to be in play here either. So yeah, that really, Reverse Entropy didn't figure in. Demon Skin to build up the shield. That shield is absolutely vital. It really does protect you and your demons, so it's kind of a little bit of a no-brainer. I think the other two very much kind of specific situations. Soul Harvest. This whole spec is based around Shadowburn. Shadowburn needs a soul shard to be used. Therefore, you've got to have a decent bit of soul shard generation with this spec, which I'm trying to use. So Soul Harvest is acting really almost like a mini Bloodlust or Hero. It's acting as a huge burst damage situation. So yes, it's on a 2-minute cooldown, and you only want to be using it when you are completely depleted of soul shards. You could still have Conflagrate charges, but use this and then use it to go bang, 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 and whack out some pretty substantial damage, and then top it up using the Conflagrate. The next row was completely discretionary. I've gone with Burning Rush. I've gone with Grimoire Supremacy. It was kind of touch and go. There were kind of... I was contemplating Grimoire of Service, and I have used Grimoire of Service within this spec, so it's kind of horses for courses, really, but decided to get the big boy, Inferno Fist, into the fray. And then the final row... Yeah, you could have had a look at Wreak Havoc, which allows you to constantly hit another target, so you're always double damaging with Shadowburn. But because this spec really does figure around Soul Shard generation, it had to be Soul Conduit for me. Every Soul Shard you spend has a 30% chance. That's almost a 1 in 3 chance of being refunded. So if you can get a few procs of them, that's just free damage, you know, free damage. So, that's what I've decided to choose as my destruction spec. Let's go out into the world and let's sort of put it into action and see how it figures. So I'm going to open up using Mana Tap. Give yourself that extra 10% damage. Then Immolate, sticking the dot on the target, normal kind of stuff. The 2 charges of Conflagrate to build up the soul shards, and then use the Shadowburn to get rid of them all. Now, I was a little bit unlucky there because Lady Luck did not favour me, and I didn't get any of the soul shards refunded with the Soul Siphon ability. So I used an Incinerate as a filler. What you got to be aware of, though, Incinerate does not generate soul shards. Immolate has a 15% chance, or that doubles up to 30% on a crit of generating a soul shard, and Conflagrate generates a soul shard all the time that you use the charges. So you really are kind of relying on that 3 out of 10 chance of the Soul Siphon to give you at least a couple back when you start to bash through them, and that is why Soul Harvest is so important if you find yourself a wee bit dry. But these have just been like one-on-ones, so nothing too taxing, nothing really to kind of worry about. But you notice by the fact I'm going back and forth, what does this spec do for you? Gives you a whole load of mobility. So I'm actually going to use Havoc now. Havoc on one target and then focus on the other, and then you can really see where it kicks in, because look at all the damage that's going on both targets during that 8-second burst of having the Havoc on. And there you can literally just finish off one target when that 8 seconds is finished, switch to the second one, and you still should have plenty of soul shards. You see there, didn't run out at all. Soul Siphon was kicking in, refunding them back to me. I got a lot of movement going on, so that was okay. Using a Chaos Bolt there, uses 2 soul shards does Chaos Bolt, so again, be very careful of that. Single target, not too bad, because you're guaranteeing yourself the critical damage on that one. But Chaos Bolt, not really necessary. I mean, it's really not that necessary in this spec. This is really purely for the Shadowburn, bang, 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 which is, you know, which is okay, but you can sort of use it as an opener. If you've got 5 soul shards to play with, you can sort of use it as well after you've used your Mana Tap to get yourself 10% extra damage, to just dump a couple away in an effort, in a hope that, you know, first of all, you've got your Conflagrate charges available, and secondly, that Soul Siphon will refund you maybe 1 or 2 soul shards. So in that case, it's kind of like good opening bursty damage. But the Shadowburn, of course, is so important because it gives this spec full on mobility. But with all of that said, is it an exciting spec, and is Destro cool to play in Legion? Well, compared to how it is now, I'd say it's definitely worse. Because the Shadowburn spec seems to be the only real viable... I don't want to use the word so much fun, because fun, really hitting only one button, can we really call that fun? I'm not entirely convinced. And if you're over-reliant on a singular button in any spec, then really, surely that spec's a little bit broken. Whereas everything else feels so clunky, using the backdraft and the and all that kind of jazz just feels so clunky, and it doesn't quite feel natural. And yeah, and at the moment on the live servers, the destruction spec seems to be pretty good. You know, it's very synergistic with each other. They all seem to work very well with each other, and I kind of have a feeling that this is a wee bit of a changing a spec for changing sake, because every spec is getting a revamp and a redo. So I don't know, I think this definitely needs looking at. You can't be over reliant on a single button in any rotation whatsoever. That's just pretty dull, even if it does give you great mobility and whatnot. And I do hope that they decide to change this up. I do hope that they do look at some of these talents, which, to be perfectly honest with you, I think should go back to being passives and looking to build the spec around something else. So Destruction, it's got a lot of bursts going on, which I suppose Destruction really does need to have. That's one of the fun features of Destro, but better than currently, I would say not. With an over-reliant on a kind of bursty Shadowburn spec, which is great for mobility, but probably not really great overall for the game. So there we go. Hope you enjoyed the vid. If you did, do give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel. Follow me on social media and Twitch for live streaming. Links, they're in the description down below. And I'll be back with some more stuff very soon. You take care, everybody. Bye-bye.